All right, so let me give an easier one over here. Someone was asking if it's possible to have commas be allowed within the quantity field.
That was definitely Mike sent that one to me. And I did make the change. It's not in production yet, but I did queue up that change in our development environment. But I did have some. I was going to ask you, Mike. I mean, I feel like that might be bad in some cases. Like, what if you send 1, 0? Like, if I just strip out the comma,
Now
what
it's
if you
10.
meant that? What if you meant it to be 1.0? Like, people use commas as a decimal.
That's
Like,
right.
that's very common.
It's a format that's outside of the United States, but I agree. I think at the moment we clarify that it is a numeric field in our documentation, right? Um, in this particular case, for whatever reason, the comma was being added as like a standard number format before the signal got sent over to us. And it's one of those things where the user didn't have the ability to format the number before they sent it to us. So it's a question of convenience versus all. Yeah, like
Yeah.
we're not going to capture all use cases, and we'll still have to deal with the errors that may occur when we strip a comma from 1, 0. That's a good use case to think about. But in general, of course, we want to make sure people send over the data properly according to the format suggestions we have in our documentation. So for numeric fields like quantity fields, our suggestion is always to make sure to send it as a number and not as a string with any kind of formatting associated with it.
Yeah, that's kind of my take. I mean, APIs, especially financial APIs, like they need to be explicitly correct, and like you don't want them to be loose with like the types of data that get sent over. I would want to learn more about that specific customer. Like, where did that number come from? They sent 1,000 with
Mm-hmm.
1 comma and the 3 zeros. Where was that coming from, and why couldn't they change it?
That's a good question. We can follow up on that.
Okay.
Is it too loose to have it that the comma only gets removed if there's 4 characters or more?
I mean, uh,
I
you
mean, that's a
could
good
get into
point.
that. You could do that, I guess. Yeah, I guess
There,
I could add
there's
that
definitely going to
rule.
be
It's just,
some
it's
bugaboo.
just, it's just that's the whole point. Like you start thinking about it, and you're just like, this is too complicated. Just send a correct number. Like that's kind of my opinion. Is like you're bending over backwards to like fix something that actually probably makes it worse. Um, and this is the first time it's ever been requested, so like it just feels odd to like change something fundamentally about the system because one person couldn't send a number without a comma in it.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair assessment, but it's also a developer assessment, right? Like we tend to take a pretty engineering viewpoint on things. We do want to support um, the crowd of people who use TradersPost that I would consider the more no code users, right? Who don't or can't rely on programming in order to format these messages before they're sent our way. So let's assume for a moment that this use case kind of supersedes the fringe case of a foreign formatting of 1, 0, and think about it from a common perspective. As long as it doesn't break more than it solves for, then I think we're in the right direction. But I hear you. Maybe you're right. If we start to having to add extra rules to it, like the number has to be at least 4 digits long before we remove the comma, then now we're getting into a too complex of a
Yeah.
domain.
What else am I missing? And I don't know, like what if someone's sending signals right now and it's getting rejected because 1, 0 isn't valid?
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden we make it valid, and now that order goes through with a quantity of 10. It just
Or in
doesn't
crypto,
seem.
where the decimals could be 5, and then all of a sudden it's a way different number.
Yeah, and then I was thinking there might be a 1, 2, 3, 4.0000005 because it's like crypto or whatever, and that obviously passes the
Well,
original.
I'd have to count before the decimal.
Yeah, so it gets complicated real quick. There's no question. Unfortunately, though, because this isn't really an API, it's a webhook. We're kind of limited in our ability to throw back an error to the user unless they're seeing it in the rejection screen. So in general, I think the advantage of having a system that cleanly escapes characters and cleans up characters on their way in is an advantage for customers, but we just have to weigh these things carefully.
And we do a lot of stuff like that. Like I call it fudging the JSON. Like when we receive the JSON, like I do some checks on it. Like if it's missing the opening and closing curly brackets, like I'll fix that. There's a lot of common mistakes. And like we use a special JSON 5 parser. Whoever invented the I can't remember the name of it. I think someone at Apple invented it. It's the left curly bracket and the right curly bracket for double quote, or sorry, not curly bracket, double quotes. The left double quote and the right double quote is technically invalid JSON. But on Mac and on Windows, when you type a double quote, it will change it to that special left side and right side double quote. So anytime anyone pastes JSON from Mac or Windows into the TradingView alert, it's got those special double quotes instead of just the plain old OG double quote. And when we received that, traders was like, this isn't JSON, because it's not. But the JSON 5 specification does allow those new characters. But it's an example of, it's like one of those things, like why it looks technically correct because it shows you like the left one is angled and the right one is angled that way. But like it literally, in my opinion, didn't improve anything except make all developers' lives worse. But anyways, we do fix stuff like that. So I'm open to adding more.
What if the user threatens to cancel their account if they put in the feature? Will that motivate you?
I'll give them the deuces. Peace.
Number of times I see that in the support tickets. I go, well, I'm going to have to cancel my account if you do it. Don't do that. Okay,
bro.
then I'm going to have to. All right.